Brothers and sisters, my friends, everyone interested in this ancient text called the Bible, you have found the Dumb Christian. I am your host, Jonathan, and today we are going to really see the true character of Laban, the guy I detest the most in the Bible, and this wrestling match, this like death match arena wrestling session, pay-per-view that Jacob has with his in-laws, his wives, his kids, his brother, and God. The Bible's about to get very real. We might get a little bit colorful, so buckle up and welcome to Dumb Christian. I was at a business conference and I heard one of the speakers say the best way to manage your team is to understand that every adult on your team is just a very large child. And this actually helped give me some insight to understand the Bible, especially Genesis and stories that are going on here at the beginning, because sometimes the behaviors and attitudes, things that they're doing are so childish. I'm like, are you 12? Wait, you're 80? How is this possible? But this is an encounter that we're going to have right off the bat here in Genesis chapter 31. We're going to go a couple chapters here. And we see that Laban's sons, who are 60, 70, 80, are whining and bitching and moaning about how well Jacob is doing for himself. Jacob is working for Laban, but God is really blessing Jacob's efforts, and he's giving him flocks and servants and kids and family, and he's just growing, giving Jacob prosperity. But his brothers-in-law are furious about this. I freaking hate that guy. They detest. That should be our inheritance. What Jacob is earning belongs to our father so that one day we can get it. And this is causing some major issues with the in-laws. Jacob has been with Laban for 20 years now. And he's been slowly learning, maybe very quickly he learned, that Laban is just this conniving, mischievous asshole who just manipulates everybody around him to better himself. And Jacob tried to leave 6 years ago, but Laban, manipulated him into staying. And so he's staying, working for Laban, and Laban keeps changing his wages. So Jacob's in charge of a bunch of flocks, of Laban's flocks. Laban says, you can keep from the flocks any sheep or goat or cattle or whatever that have certain color patterns. Well, every time the flocks give birth, they just so happen to have the stripes. Laban says, you can have all the striped ones. And there's just a bunch of striped animals that are born that season. And then Laban changes his mind. No. Next time, only the ones that just have spots. And then sure enough, the next time it was time for birthing season, all the flock were born with spots. And then Laban keeps changing the conditions and his wages. And Jacob is just like, this is horrible. I hate this. I have tension among my wives and my concubines, and they're fighting over who gets me and how many kids, and that's a problem. And now his in-laws, his father, who is also his father-in-law, who is also his boss, and he's just like, I need to get home. I'm done with this. I can't take it anymore, but I don't know how to leave. I know Laban is such a manipulative bastard. He's going to make me stay. And if I do leave, he'll make me leave everything I've earned. He'll take away from me my wives, my kids, my flocks. I came here with nothing but the clothes on my back and a walking stick, and I know he's going to try and make that be the case when I leave. I don't know how to leave. I don't know, and this sets the stage for a huge pay-per-view wrestling match. And it starts. The first contestants are Jacob, Laban, and Laban's sons. Jacob's wives, his kids, the tension, the family, it's all growing. And he goes to sleep one night and he has a dream. And in his dream, the God that appeared to him, remember when we learned about Jacob's ladder? That same God appears to Jacob in a dream. And he says, look, I've provided for you all the times that the flocks birthed the wages that were what Laban said you could keep. I did that. I made sure I took care of you. I know you worked hard and you had some clever little plans. You had some ruses. That's great. But ultimately, the reason you're so blessed is because I'm choosing to be faithful to the promise I made to your grandfather, to your dad, and now to you. I want you to go back to your father's house. It's time for you to leave this land and return home. And if you remember, when Jacob had that dream, he said, God, if you'll provide for me, protect me, and bring me back to my father's house one day, I'll worship you and serve you. Okay, God says, let's go. We're going back to your father's house. Jacob is fairly concerned. How do I navigate my father-in-law and my boss, who's got everyone in town on his side? I know no one would put up a fight to defend my honor if he screwed me over. So how do I handle this? So he thinks to himself, okay, I think I can maybe escape, but I need to know that my wives, my kids, we're all on the same page with this. So he calls a family meeting. Family meeting, everyone to the living room. All right, everyone, calm down. Eyes on me. If you can hear me, clap once. Yeah. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm not trying to talk smack about your dad. I know he's your father, and I want to honor that, but he's really abused how well I've taken care of his property, his wealth, and how I've been a blessing to him. He's trying to undermine me every step of the way. And I had a dream that God said, it's time for me to go back home. I need to make sure everyone's on board with me. Rachel and Leah and the concubines say yes. Laban hasn't done us any favors. We don't really care what he's up to, and he hasn't treated us very valuably. He doesn't love us. So yeah. Whatever you say, especially if God's given you a dream to bounce, let's get out of here. So Jacob says, okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you guys to pack up and get ready to leave, because as soon as I get back, we're leaving. So he goes into Laban's house or whatever, and he goes up to him and says, hey, I'm going to take a couple days to go shear my sheep. It's time for their coats to be cut. I'm going to go shear my sheep. So I'll be gone for a little while. I'll see you when I see you. Laban's like, I don't care. Get out of here. Take care of your stuff. And then you better get back to work. Well, 3 days go by. Someone who was out in the fields was looking and stumbled upon Jacob's house where Jacob was living, and it's empty. There's no sheep. There's no goats. There's no cattle. There's no servants. There's nothing. It's gone. He runs back to Laban. Laban. Jacob left. He tricked you. Laban is furious. Jacob got a 3-day head start before Laban found out. But you move fairly slowly when it's more than just you. When it was just Jacob and a walking stick, he could move pretty quick. But now he's got small children. He's got flocks who aren't, they're not galloping. They're kind of meandering, right? So you got to direct them, keep them straight, keep them directed. And this is going to take a lot longer than if he's by himself. So he's not making as much progress as he did on his way to Laban's. Well, Laban sets out on some horses, grabs a crew, as any typical stereotypical movie bully. He brings with him his muscle, and they set out to track Jacob down. They finally catch up. He's about a day's journey away, so that night they set up camp. Laban falls asleep, and now Laban has a dream where Yahweh God appears to him. And he says, listen up, sucker. You're about to deal with one of my kids. And I know what type of man you are. Don't even think about roughing him up. Don't even think about hustling him. Don't you dare speak evil to him. Just don't even say anything good or bad to this guy. Because that's typically how we like to sandwich things, right? We might start with something good just so that we can say, you did this great, but this really pissed me off. God says, don't even play any games. If you want to say bye, fine, but don't say anything good or bad to Jacob. Don't mess with him, okay? Laban wakes up from a dream, again, like one of those okay, what's real? What just happened? But then he can feel the weight. Oh, man. Okay, I better take this dream very seriously. So he goes and he approaches Jacob, he finally catches up to him. It's been another day. Jacob has set up tents. His family is getting ready to settle down for the night. So Laban and his crew set up tents. And then just like the movie scene where the villain arrogantly walks into the camp, Jacob. Did you think I wasn't going to find out? Did you think I wouldn't catch up to you? What were you thinking running away, and you lied to me? Oh, Jacob, I'm so disappointed. You know that tense moment where you're like, oh, it's about to hit the fan. What's gonna happen? And his muscle, slowly walking behind him, swinging the bat into their hand, very, very menacingly. And he says, why would you lie and run away? And on top of that, why would you steal my household gods? And something just triggers inside Jacob. Up to this point, as far as we know, he hasn't really taken a stand against Laban. But in this moment, he says, okay, enough is enough. You listen here, buddy. You have manipulated me, you've deceived me, you tricked me into marrying your oldest daughter when you promised me your youngest. Now I have this cluster of a family, use your imagination there. You've changed my wages, you've deceived me, manipulated. You are an asshole, Laban. That's why I left without telling you. I knew that if I told you, you would try and take everything away from me. So screw you, man. Screw you. And by the way, I don't even know what you're talking about. Your household gods. Nobody cares about your household gods. If anybody here has them, you can put them to death. Come on. What? Jacob stands his ground. Little did he know, though, that Rachel, the youngest daughter, the wife he really loved, really wanted to stick it to her dad. So while she was supposed to be getting ready when Jacob had a conversation with Laban about shearing the sheep, Rachel snuck into Laban's house and stole his little action figure gods. And she has them, and Jacob doesn't know this. So Laban gets furious, and he's tearing through everybody's tent. He goes through Jacob's tent, and then Leah's tent, and Rachel's tent. But Rachel had hidden these little action figure gods in the camel's saddle that she was riding. And Laban finally comes up to Rachel, and she says, "Oh, sorry, Dad. Aunt Flo is visiting, so I can't get off the saddle. I hope you understand. She's having her period." And I think she's lying. I don't actually know. But so she doesn't have to get up and reveal that she is sitting on Laban's household gods. And and Jacob just says, "See, why are you accusing me of stuff that you don't even know what you're talking about?" Okay. And Laban just loses it. This is the moment where every time I read it, I'm like, oh, I hate Laban. And I know I'm not supposed to hate. I struggle with that. Let's just say I hate how Laban speaks to Jacob, how he's abusive and manipulative, and the way he talks about his daughters and their God. He says, "You wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for me. Those are my daughters. All their kids are my kids. All these flocks that you've taken with you, they're my flocks." And he's going back on his contract, on his promises to Jacob, saying, "You've earned this. You've worked for this. This is what I promised you would have." And Laban is just not having it. And he's like, "It's all mine. It's all mine." And then something shifts instantly in Laban's attitude and the way he talks to Jacob. So I imagine he's turning red in the face, shaking his fists at Jacob. And then right behind Jacob, I imagine he sees this apparition of Yahweh God from his dream the night before, who's just standing there, crossing his arms, shaking his head "I said, do not talk to him like that." And so Laban's like, well, how about this? Let's just have a little going away party so that I can say goodbye to everybody. And he just goes he's so pathetic. I know God loves everybody. Anyway, let's have a little party, a going away party, and let's do this. Jacob, let's set up a little monument. Let's make a pile of stones and set it up in a way to say that it'll be a reminder. If either one of us goes to visit the other or crosses past this monument, this pillar, neither one of us will do so in order to harm the other, because Laban was about to lose his ever-loving mind. I'm sure if God hadn't said and been reminding him, don't you do it, don't you dare say anything good or bad to Jacob, Laban just would have ripped him apart. Like I said, he's got the whole town back home behind him on his side. He's got an entourage with him who are going to back him up and support him. Jacob's kind of SOL at this point, except that God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, now slowly soon the God of Jacob, intervenes and protects, provides. So they have a little party. They eat some bread. They drink some wine. They set up a monument. They spit in their hands, shake hands. Deal. Jacob's got to be questioning, like, what's the trick here? What's the catch? Laban always has something up his sleeve. I don't know, but I don't really have a choice. So, okay, we'll do it. Next morning, Laban wakes up, kisses his daughters, kisses his grandchildren, gives them a blessing, and then leaves forever. Midrash says that we will occasionally see him throughout other parts of the Bible, but I don't know that we'll get into that ever. Jacob is now, okay, the pay-per-view wrestling match, a couple of opponents have been eliminated. The in-law brothers are no longer a part of the match. The in-law father, the in-law boss dad, he is no longer a part of the match, but we still have to deal with Esau back home. If you remember, Esau is Jacob's twin brother. They are both now 97. And the last Jacob knew, Esau had vowed to kill Jacob once their father Isaac died. He hasn't died yet. Jacob doesn't know that. But he's going back home to where his brother is, and the last he knew, his brother wanted to kill him. So there's still this tension between him and Esau that he doesn't know if it's resolved or not. But there's also tension between Jacob and God. The wrestling, the death match has been reduced, but there's still a couple major characters duking it out. Jacob, Esau, and God. Because God said, go back home. I want to do what you say to do, God, but I'm scared. I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know what to do. So what Jacob decides to do is he thinks he's very clever, and so he divides up his whole massive assembly, which he's basically a small town at this point. Thousands of sheep and goats and cattle. He's got servants. He's got a growing family, and he says, he makes the note, I came here with nothing but a walking staff. Now I'm 2 camps. There's so many of us, we can't even camp in one campground. We have to separate into 2 very different camp areas. So what he does is he actually creates 2 caravans made up of gifts, of servants and of sheep and goats and cattle, and he sends them one after the other. And he says, okay, if you make your way back to my father's home and you encounter a guy named Esau and he asks who you are, what I want you to do is I want you to tell him, we are servants of your brother Jacob, and all of this is a gift to you from him. Hopefully, if he's still mad, because he's had 20 years to stew on this, either he's gotten over it or he's just really, really fuming mad. If he's still mad, hopefully these caravans of gifts will placate him and we'll be okay. So then he sends the first caravan of gifts and then a second caravan of gifts, and then he sends his wife, children, and all the rest of his estate on ahead of him, and he's left by himself. And that was a whole day just to get that organized. So it's starting to turn evening again, and he's there by himself, really tormented and torn. What do I do? What am I supposed to do? God, I want to follow you, but I just don't know how. I don't know how this is going to work out. Then the Bible just jumps to this weird scenario where it says he wrestled with a man. And I think, like, what does that mean? What's happening there? So let's just kind of pull back for a second and use our imagination, I guess. Jacob is by himself, and out of nowhere comes this man. We don't know who he is. We don't know where he's from. We don't know his name or even why he's there. So he sits down next to Jacob and he says, What's going on? What are you doing here? Why are you by yourself? And I imagine he's asking Jacob some pretty tough questions about his past and his future and his faith. It gets to the point where Jacob's getting frustrated and they wrestle. They literally have a physical wrestling match, and they're wrestling into the night. They're grappling and they go back and forth and back and forth, and the sun is starting to rise. Like, they literally wrestled all night. The sun is starting to crest over the horizon. The dawn is approaching, and Jacob finally pins this guy. And somehow this guy is able to reach, and then he just touches Jacob's hip, and with divine power dislocates Jacob's hip. So he manages to break free for a second. It shocks Jacob, it hurts, but then he regathers himself and says, "Hang on, let's go again." And he lunges, even with his hip not working properly, and he wrestles with the guy, and he pins him again. And the guy says, okay, I surrender. Uncle. And Jacob says, no way. I'm not letting you go until you bless me, because I know there's something significant about you. You dislocated my hip just by touching it. Who are you? Bless me. And the guy says, okay. All right, I'll tell you what. And he taps out and he says, we're going to change your name to Israel. Remember Bethel, which was the place that that Jacob had the dream, Jacob's ladder dream, and he set up a monument called Bethel, house of God. This man says they're going to change Jacob's name from Jacob, which means cheater, to Israel, which means wrestles with God. And he says, we're going to change your name to wrestles with God, which doesn't officially happen for a few chapters. But he says, we're going to change your name because you wrestled with God and men, and you've prevailed. How did he prevail? Like, what does it mean to win the wrestling match? And I think if we pull back and look at the whole story, we see that what it means to wrestle with God when God says, go home. I want you to reconcile. I want you to go on this journey. I want you to do this mission. I want you to work hard for your boss. I want you to be honorable. I want you to live with integrity. And Jacob says, I'm trying. I want to. And I will do it even if it means dislocating my hip. Even if it's painful, I will see it through to the end. I don't know what it holds. I don't know what's going to happen when I leave my boss, father-in-law. I don't know what's going to happen when I go home to my brother who wants to kill me. But if God wants me to take these steps, I'll see it through to the end, even if it's painful. And the man says, yeah, that's what God is looking for. And that's where we actually get the name Israel for the nation, because the nation of Israel comes from Jacob's 12 sons. They each have their own tribes. So they become 12 tribes. The nation of Israel, God is saying, that's who I want my people to be. People who wrestle with me. People who are willing to say, this doesn't look right. I'm not thrilled. I don't see how this is going to work out. But I'll see it through to the end. I'm going to figure this out. I'm not going to give up, basically. We're going to wrestle until I've figured out what's right, what's true, what's good, what's real. And here God is ultimately saying, yeah, that's who I want my people to be. Pro wrestlers. Okay, so Jacob takes a deep breath, and then the man disappears, right? Midrash has some things to say about who this guy is, but it's a little too out there even for me, so we're just going to stick with it's a guy sent by God. Let's just say that. And Jacob says, okay, let's see this through to the end. So he packs his stuff up, and he makes his way back home. Finally, he sees Esau, and Esau's approaching with like 400 guys. Of course, that's going to be a little bit terrifying to see if you're Jacob, thinking your brother wants to kill you. Okay, here he comes. He's ready to wipe me out. Finally, they meet each other, and Esau just embraces him, and they both start weeping, crying. They haven't seen each other for 20 years. And Esau says, who are all these women and children? What is all this stuff with you? And he's like, well, God has blessed me. These are my kids, your nieces and nephews. These are my wives. And then Esau says, yeah, well, what was up with all that stuff that came before you? And Jacob said, I wanted to give you a gift. And Esau's kind of, Midrash does say that Esau's not like over it, but he's matured a little bit, so he's just kind of sucking it up. There's still a little bitterness, but Esau says, ultimately, I'm just glad you're back, brother. Let's go. Jacob says, well, I can't rush. It's still going to take me a little bit of time because I got small kids. I got a flocks. It's going to take us a while. Esau says, you want me to leave some bodyguards with you? And Jacob says, no. I'm sure. I'm fine. I'm serious. I'm serious. I don't need help. Okay, finally. They go back and forth, whatever. Esau heads back home. Jacob makes his way back home, but they discover that when they get close to each other, both of them have estates that are far too large to really live in harmony together. So they kind of part ways, not too far, maybe like a day's journey away from each other, so we could still go see Uncle Esau for Thanksgiving. But they set up their own little areas, and Isaac hasn't died yet. Isaac is alive, Rebekah's alive. Jacob gets to come back and see mom and dad one last time, and then Isaac does eventually die at 180 years old. But Jacob got to see him one more time. That is Genesis 31 through 33. I hope you guys are encouraged. And yeah, we're actually going to discover what's next in chapter 34. Oh, yeah. Next one. Oh, the next chapter is really good. I love Genesis chapter 34, but we'll have to save that for next time. I've been your host, Jonathan, the Dumb Christian. I love you guys. I'll catch you later. I want to leave you off with one more teaser for the tag cast that just launched last week. Take a look.
It's almost like truth without grace is just condemnation.
And grace without truth is just permission.
And to see things through God's lens, we need both truth and grace.
Like their tag team partners. We should do a podcast where we tag team like the Bible and issues going on in the world through the lens of truth and grace.
Well, that's an idea.
Mm-hmm. You got any snacks? I am hungry. Oh, and we could call it the Tag Cast. There you have it. The real true character of Laban is revealed, and Jacob's desire to figure out what is right, true, good, what the best course of action is in his life, only to discover that God is the source of the best course of action, even though sometimes it's difficult and leaves him in pain. Sometimes God's greatest good causes a little bit of pain that we have to walk through, that we just might have to wrestle through. Check us out on YouTube, Dumb Christian Podcast. Hit subscribe, like, ring that bell so you know when new content is dropping. I love you guys. Catch you later.